All right, everyone. Hello and welcome to this webinar on how to get more randomizations. It is only me today, Ivan Vargas, Director of Site Relations at TrialJoin. This is a recording of a previous webinar, so Anand will not be with us today. But let's go ahead and get started here. With the purpose of this webinar, I aim to share actionable insights and suggestions that will result in your site randomizing more patients without spending extra funds, okay? So what I want to do here is read a quick disclaimer. We are not the authority on what we're going to cover. In this industry, things do change all the time. The information that we're going to give you today might eventually somehow become outdated. All right, our goal is to get you to be proactive about patient recruitment and maybe even realize that it may be the unorthodox that leads to an increase in randomizations. It's the little things that add up when recruiting. All right, so remember that. It's the little things that add up. That's very important. Now, for some of you, you're already on top of most of what I'm going to cover, and that's great. My hope for you is that there will be a couple of things here and there that make you say, now that's something we should consider trying out. So if you spent just 1 hour watching this and you learn only one little thing, but that one little thing gets you at least one extra randomization in each and every one of your studies, then my goal here is accomplished. So I hope that makes sense. Let's go on to the next slide. And I created a slide for this because that's how important I think it is. It's the small things that we can add up that will lead to change, all right? So who is this webinar for? This webinar is for anyone that is interested or that's involved in the day-to-day responsibilities of patient recruitment, whether it's clinical research coordinators, principal investigators, research associates, directors, monitors, or patient recruitment specialists. Now, here's a quick preview of this webinar. It'll take about an hour, but the time estimate there on YouTube is probably more accurate. There is no need for notes. I want you to absorb as much as possible, so there is no need for notes, as most of this content is in a 27-page guide that you can request from me. All right, so it started out as a very small project, and I ended up turning it into a weeks-long ordeal because I quickly realized that this is not a game won by a secret mojo sauce recipe. This is a game won by fundamentals and, again, the little things. All right, so here's a preview of the subject. We'll be covering it, so I won't spend too much time on that. You can go ahead and take a look at that. Now, if your end goal is to increase randomizations, then it might benefit you to adopt these two concepts. All right, number one, patient recruitment is sales, and we'll take a look at that early on. Accepting that what you're doing is sales will help you create an effective structure for successful patient recruitment. Now, the next thing, put yourself in their shoes, meaning put yourself in the shoes of potential patients or prospects, if you will. Think about this, and we'll get to it soon, okay? Now, keep these two mind frames in place throughout the entire webinar, and you're already ahead of the game. Okay, so let's move on and talk about why patient recruitment is sales and why recruitment efforts shouldn't end when a patient simply and quickly fills out a 3-field online form. Okay, so patient recruitment is sales. Let that sink in. All right, so now I'm sorry if that makes you a little anxious or you don't like to hear that. We know that that's not what you signed up for when you began working in this industry, right? But it's okay because we're here to help and hopefully make sense of it all. Now, sales requires a funnel process, and that's what we're doing here in patient recruitment, from broad marketing down to screening and enrolling, right? Product or service, all right? We have a product or service. In this case, that product service is the service provided by the research site and the PI in administering and monitoring the trial. Then we have our customer, and that, of course, is the patient. Pretty straightforward up until this point, right? And what do we want? Well, we want to enroll them in our study. Granted, they qualify. That is the sale, folks. That's the action step we want them to take. And lastly, patient retention is analogous to account management or customer service. How so? Well, because we want them to come back to the next appointment, right? So just like a membership-based service wants them to come back every month or every year, etc., it's a similar thing here. So always keep this in mind, and you'll quickly realize that it'll help guide you when recruiting. Now, let's take a look at current challenges in patient recruitment and, more than anything, challenges in converting those referrals to randomizations. A number of factors that are sometimes out of our control will influence our ability to recruit successfully. And yes, they're challenging, but we have to find a way to overcome them. And what worked last year and today might not work tomorrow. So to answer the question of what works, I think one has to acknowledge that change is inevitable. All right, so some of our clients have complained that it has become more difficult to randomize referrals. And when we dive deeper into the subject and try to identify why it's more difficult to randomize, we begin to realize that it's not an industry with fixed formulas. In other words, there are a number of variables that could be affecting this, and we have a suspicion as to what those are, but we cannot say with certainty how much each variable is contributing. All right, this is why we are big believers in preaching the little things, because if you have the fundamentals down, then you at least have a base to work off of. So this all reminds me of my back problem. I have a herniated disc that causes me a lot of pain daily, and I go to rehab regularly, and I do keep an anti-inflammatory diet. And despite that, some days are good, some days are horrible. At the beginning of it all, I would break my head trying to pinpoint what I did wrong yesterday that might be contributing to my pain today. But then I kind of quickly learned that doing that is too stressful. And so now my only resolve is to focus on the little things as a whole: proper sleep, proper nutrition, daily movement, that sort of thing. And the more I focus on the little things, the lesser the severity of my pain will be. And I just have to have faith in those fundamentals, as that's what's under my control. So in the realm of patient recruitment, there can be a number of variables, and we cannot say with certainty how much each one affects patient recruitment. Now, it could be anything from not having developed adequate trust to the shortening attention spans of patients. Thank you, internet. Thank you, social media. And to increase competition, to the wrong online marketing approach, or get this, it can be a little bit of each, right? So sometimes things are in our control and we can correct them. Sometimes they're out of our control and we have to find ways to work around them. So if you've been in this industry long enough, there might be times when you feel that you're being asked to do more with less. We get you, we feel you. I don't know if that resonates with you, but sponsors want more patients. Sites want to bring on more studies. Sponsors want their drugs approved without any delays. And then it all lands on you to fill that gap. And that is why we have to take a look at proper preparation. A key component of this, of a solid recruitment process for patients, is the ability of information. This makes a strong online presence necessary. So having prospective participants go through a difficult time searching for information about the trial and the enrollment requirements, that might discourage them from moving forward with the process. Okay, so we can have chaos or we can have order. In this next section, we'll take a closer look at proper preparation to avoid chaos and avoid losing the interest of potential patients. All right, so a special trial joint collaborator and industry veteran, Vitaly Fursov, has shared his insight into elements that contribute to a successful patient recruitment campaign. So from the perspective of a senior clinical research associate, here are his suggestions. He recommends that clinical research coordinators set aside time and dedicated selected personnel to strategize a successful campaign. So your key personnel should include at least one of the investigators. Now, many factors should be considered during this. For example, will you run the campaign yourselves or will you outsource it? So every path will require additional planning, and I'm talking here about patient recruitment, and special consideration might be given to your target demographic, as that might alter the course you choose to take in terms of patient recruitment, right? So the goal being here is to avoid any interruptions or delays that might undermine your recruitment efforts. Now, here's an exercise that I would like everybody to participate in. So everyone close your eyes, and we're going to do a little exercise here. What I want you to do is think about a study that you're currently working on and that has a debilitating condition. All right, so we're talking something serious here. Now, picture yourself in the shoes of a patient. Chances are they probably know nothing about clinical trials. They don't know what a clinical research site is. They don't know what a principal investigator does. They don't know what a placebo is. They don't know that they'll have to drive to your site 9 times in the next 3 months, even though your site is 35 miles away. All right, and last but not least, they've probably tried multiple things to resolve or alleviate their condition without any luck. In other words, what I'm trying to get at is we don't know what's going on in the mind of the patient. We can only guess. So now you're able to see why there might be some apprehension and distrust in the next best cure, if you will, or quote unquote, the next best cure. And guess what? There's a good chance they'll be reluctant to proceed, if they proceed at all. All right, so how did that exercise make you feel as a patient? So hold that feeling while we head into the next slide. And this is why there's a lot of ground to cover when it comes to winning them over. All right. Sometimes them fitting perfectly into the inclusion criteria is simply not enough. And to win them over, not only will you have to come across as a compassionate hero, but you'll also have to educate them. And that's the topic of our next slide. What is patient education? In this case, the short answer is empowerment. All right. Patient education is more than just informing them about their condition or educating them about the clinical trial process. Patient education is the empowerment of your patients. They have to know they're in control. So take a trip back to, say, your hardest math class ever and how you felt when you learned how to solve a difficult problem. You felt empowered, right? In sales, we typically don't make it a goal of empowering the client per se, but this is a little bit different. We want to empower a patient through proper education, because when they understand the clinical trial journey, they understand the process and they'll trust you a little bit more. So, some of you might be asking, but Ivan, how do we educate our patients? To answer this, we first want to ask, what are we educating them on? We want to educate them not only on their condition, but also the clinical trial process. Doing so should lead you and your staff to earning a little bit more of their trust. All right, we want to We often spend time convincing clinical research sites we work with to launch their own patient education campaigns on top of patient education campaigns that we initiate as part of our service. And more, we're beginning to see the fruits of those efforts pay off. Now, this does not have to be a 4-unit advanced college course that you're giving them, but sending them articles and videos about their condition might send them the message that you're on their team and you're trying to help them. All right, so let me ask you this. Does your website have a video discussing the clinical trial process? There are some websites that I've come across that feature this, and I think that can be a very powerful tool in your favor. So that's just something to think about there. Now, a note on retention. We've actually done a webinar on this topic alone, so that can be a whole nother conversation. But the one message that I do want to get across is that everything we're teaching and preaching here should not end simply when the patient enrolls in the study. All right, patient retention and the efforts to attain it should constantly place an emphasis on the things that you did to get them to sign up in the first place. In other words, you're continually renewing their trust between your team and the patient. All right, and here we have 2 staff members chasing after their study dropouts. Of course, this is what we don't want to see. So focusing only on recruitment without having a long-term plan to nurture these patients is a mistake. That's why we're not surprised when we encounter sites with large patient dropouts or large patient dropout rates. All right, so now this might sound redundant, but look at it as more of a recap of elements that we can incorporate to gain their trust. If you go out on a date with somebody, you obviously build up to them and begin to trust them the more familiar you become with them, right? It's the same thing in patient recruitment. You'll gain their trust slowly by first focusing on familiarity. So what is one way to start building familiarity? Well, your website has an Area 51 level secret, and that is your About Us section. Okay, the About Us section in a website is essentially an open platform where you, your staff, your PI, and your director can share as much information about yourselves and your site. So to drive my point home, let me ask you a question using a hypothetical example. So let's say you had to take your parents or your kids to the doctor, and you had 2 doctors to choose from. One doctor you knew everything about, and the other one you don't even know their name. Which doctor would you pick? Pretty straightforward, right? Pretty obvious. But this explains why you should have an About Us section to showcase your team. This is a case of more is better. Okay, so here's a good initiative to undertake. Write or rather rewrite your current bios within the About Us section of your website. So the About Us section should include education, residency, work experience, all the formal stuff, but also casual and personal stuff like hobbies, kids, hometown, etc. Something that humanizes the doctor or the PI. Something that says, hey, I'm also human, and subliminally sends the message that, hey, I'm also on your side. Because if you think about it, when they think about a trial that they're part of, they're probably thinking big pharma. So there's no bond between them and you and your staff if that's the mind frame they have in place. So including personal information leads to familiarity, which builds trust and leads to more randomizations. So remember, it's the little things, right? Now, a special note here, Trial Join has helped dozens of sponsors and sites. In fact, some of them were part of this webinar who have helped, where we have helped them build their websites for their studies and research sites. So if you need help, feel free to reach out to me, and I'll include my contact information at the end of this this webinar. Okay. Now, one thing to note here, the aesthetic value and the amount of key information and essential elements on a website are directly correlated with the projected level of professionalism from your site, which leads to trust, which can result in more randomizations. So this might be arguable, but it's our belief that there might be times when a website can make or break a deal. Okay, so one thing to note here is the aesthetic value and the amount of key information and essential elements on a website are directly correlated with the projected level of professionalism from your site, which leads to trust, which can result in more randomizations. Now, this might be arguable, but it's our belief that there might be times when a website can make or break a deal. And so we have two sections here that are showcased, and we have a good header and another area on the homepage that quickly showcases the study opportunities. Right? So these are essential elements of a website. And let's dissect this header real quick here. This is a good header because it shows the times of the office, the phone number, and the address up front. So if a patient needs quick information, they can get it without wasting too much time. Then in the menu, clinical trials is in bold and in different colors to showcase the importance of that information. Okay, this helps visiting patients quickly find the open trials in the area. And then next is the study opportunities section on the homepage. In this case, the patient scrolls further down and they can quickly see your biggest studies going on and see if they would be a good fit for that. All right. Now, the next thing you have to really pay attention behind is mobilized or mobile optimized websites. This is vital more than ever, because especially if you are using any sort of social media advertisement, then around 70% of your traffic will be mobile. 100% of if you're on Instagram, and about 70% if you're on Facebook. That means make sure you visit your website from the smallest iPhone and an older iPhone. This way you can see what it looks like on a small screen and also test how quickly it loads. All right, now moving on to our next subject, and that is automation. It's really time to adapt to the current ways of doing marketing. As you generate more referrals online, you have to follow the trends of internet marketing. This is because you're now competing against many other companies and the noise that they make. So while your research study may be extremely important to them 1 minute, another ad showing them 6 easy tips to lose that belly fat might show up, stealing their attention away from your study. Customers' attention is basically now counted in micro moments, which marketers have to quote unquote catch and use smartly. Now, a successful campaign will incorporate automation to help address this. And remember, we're treating patient recruitment as a sales process. All right. Now, automation within a clinical research site setting can take on many functions. In respect to patient recruitment, automation can be used to reduce human error, such as forgetting to follow up, and it can also increase process efficiency. So if you implement it right, automation will increase the number of randomizations, your retention rate, and overall revenue. So if you're not already using a HIPAA-compliant CRM, you should start using one to keep all of your contacts organized and save you a lot of time when networking as well. A lot of them will have features that you can use to automate tasks and create automated workflows as well. And here's an action step that you can take. Dive deeper into finding a software or creating a system that works best for your site. Now, trial join services do come with access to our Helix platform, and that's a good starting point for creating a structured process. And we know some of our competitors offer similar platforms, and we encourage you to always take advantage of them. The take-home message here is that a structured, automated system can have significant results and go a long ways. This is not one of those little things we keep talking about. This is pretty much essential to being more organized. And here's an idea that I've been playing with. Have you ever come across a research site's website that has a welcome video featuring the PI and or some of the staff? I'm actually yet to see that, and I have a hypothesis that something like this can produce really great results. The video can include a personal message from the PI or the director or both of them, as well as a what to expect section. So you can use that what to expect section as a clinical trial 101, for example. What takes place during a clinical trial? So we're talking about patient education here, right? You're telling them what to expect next or what they can expect if they were to participate in a clinical trial. It'll help you, it'll help not only you, but it'll also help us, the industry as a whole. So the idea for a welcome video is for those willing to go above and beyond their current efforts. Remember, Trial Join does have a video production team that can assist with this sort of project. It sounds daunting, but it's a lot easier than it seems, and it really can be a great time investment. So we definitely want you to try that out. Okay, now moving on, this might apply to only a few of you, but it is critical. Put yourself in their shoes. So picture this. You have a condition for which you've struggled to find a good cure or remedy for. You see an online ad and you gain just enough hope to sign up. A few hours or a day goes by, then you get a call from an unknown number, so naturally you don't answer, and you find out it's the research site which you just signed up for, so then you call them back. There is no answer. You wait. You call again 15 minutes later, and you get a voicemail. Folks, this is a major, major no-no. Please fix this stat. And remember, try to place yourself in the shoes of your potential patients. This is one sure way to get off on the wrong foot. You've probably experienced it yourself. You'll call a restaurant or any business during normal business hours and there's no answer. And guess what? You move on. You either forget it or you move on to their competitor. Now, the content of this webinar is mostly suggestions, but I think this is an exception. This is a must. You have to fix this. You can retain an answering service. You can stagger lunch breaks. But failure to address this is definitely undermining your patient recruitment efforts. And I haven't even mentioned the sites that are fortunate enough to close early on Fridays or not even be open at all. That's a lot of you. That's a lot of sites out there. That's great for you, but not so good for your patients trying to reach you, especially if it's potential patients that are not yet enrolled in the study. So perhaps you can have one person dedicated to the phones on those days. All right. Now, a site that we used to work with once complained to us about not randomizing enough of the referrals that we were sending them. We later found out that the reason for that is that they were taking as long as 3 to 4 months to call them, to reach out to them. Now, I did not misspeak. That is 3 to 4 months to reach out to these referrals. Now, I trust that none of you fall into that category, but if you do, our software would tell us that you're taking a long time to reach out to them. Now, we know that every site is different and will have different needs paired with different resources. That's understandable. The message here that we want to tattoo on your heads is that you should have a well-structured follow-up strategy that incorporates some level of automation to try to avoid this type of scenario. All right, so we encourage you to keep a detailed log of outreach efforts and make adjustments accordingly. For example, 1 month you can test one approach and then change it the following month after you do a thorough assessment of outreach outcomes. All right. Now, this type of constant comparison and adjustment, it will lead to a more fine-tuned approach in the long run, resulting in more randomizations. Now, research sites should contact new referrals stat immediately. As soon as you get the referral, ideally, you have somebody to call them right away. The more time that goes by, the lesser the chance of connecting with them. And we do have a sample follow-up calendar that's included in the guide that we created and that you can request from me. Okay, so take a look at that and hopefully it is helpful. Ivan, what the heck are you talking about? I did not start watching this webinar for you to tell me to work on Saturdays. Now, everyone calm down, hear me out. I know this sounds like a crazy idea, but Saturdays are actually a great day to call as you do have a higher chance of reaching more people. Something like a 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. shift for this might work really well and might prove to be a fruitful investment. Now, we know that this might not sound like a popular idea, but if you think about it, there might be staff members willing to work a Saturday shift here and there in exchange for leaving early on a regular weekday, right? So you don't have to make it a mandatory thing, but you can make it optional. It doesn't have to be rigid, but who knows? It can be something that you experiment with and see if it's worth it. And yes, I have come across a site or two that opens on Saturdays. Remember this because it's going to tie in with another slide that I'll cover shortly. So phone etiquette, be polite. It's pretty straightforward, but it could be a good reminder. It doesn't matter what kind of response you get from a potential volunteer. Be sure to thank them for speaking with you. Nowadays, people do have busy schedules, so you should thank them for taking the time to listen to you over the phone. Negative responses, we know they're common, but you can learn from them, learn from that experience by analyzing what went wrong in the conversation and then improving your skills for the future. So remember that the energy you put out will go full circle. Okay, so during the call, knowing the volunteer's reason for their interest in a study is a key piece of information. So to get them to open up, try questions like, tell us about your condition, or what are you looking to achieve by participating in this study? If they say something like, I want to get paid, you know that's a red flag, and chances are they're not going to randomize or at least get very far into the study. They're very neutral and unsuggesting questions, but they can be very powerful because they do express compassion, okay? What we don't want to see you do is making the mistake of approaching every person the same way. So tailoring your conversations is useful because it shows that you care about the volunteer's needs. And in the end, if you prove a genuine interest, potential participants will trust you and have a better chance of having more volunteers in your study. Okay. Now, using the right elements in your outreach messaging can go a long ways as well. So people are more motivated by their feelings than they are by logic or rationale. Remember that. And I will cover that more in the guide as well. People are more motivated by their feelings than they are by logic or rationale. Very, very important. Okay. Therefore, it's a good idea to have your messaging project empathy and understanding. If you take this approach, it's more likely your referral will act based on how you make them feel. This is far more powerful than any other method of motivating them. And if you want to go the extra mile, here's something you can do. Okay, now we know it's not for everyone, but folks, listen to this. The same site that opens on Saturdays is the same site whose PI calls referrals himself. I kid you not, it's pretty safe to say that these are the reasons why they're always the highest enrollment site out of the study. That's their secret sauce. They convert on average 25% of the referrals that we send them. There's something about referrals hearing directly from the doctor that is very powerful. Now, we don't expect everyone to do the same. Everybody has different resources. Rather, you should take this as a testament that going the extra mile does pay off. If you can get your PI to help, great. If you can't, try mentioning the doctor's name in your messaging. Something such as, "Hi, this is Joe calling on behalf of Dr. Smith here at Acme Clinical Trials," and then continue on with your message. This can be very powerful. The guide that I created has a section with sample scripts for email, voicemail, and text messaging that you can incorporate some of these that you can use to incorporate some of these elements. Okay. Now, let's go on to this next slide here. Don't forget that every screening may be the initial interaction between your volunteer and the study and staff. So first impressions have a significant impact on everyone, and potential patients is not an exception, right? If you want clinical trials to be widely accepted, which we all want, play your part by treating each volunteer the best that you possibly can so that they can participate in trials. Because if they don't participate in your trial, as long as you don't leave a bad taste in their mouth, they might go on and participate in a different clinical trial, even if it's not part of your site. But guess what? If we all did that, then I think we're all kind of helping each other out, right? So try to connect, pay attention to signs of frustration and confusion from your volunteers. Ignoring any vocal signs or cues, which may mean they're frustrated or confused, could hurt that relationship. Pay attention to these details, because the last thing you want to do is give them the wrong impression about trials and recruiters. If you ever hear a sigh from the volunteer while you're running the screening questions, acknowledge it by saying something like, "Yes, we know it's a lot of questions. Thank you for taking the time to answer them." It's also useful to explain why there are so many questions in the screening process. You can mention that there are strict criteria for choosing participants, and try your best to be personable and understanding. So explanation and transparency builds your credibility and your volunteers' interest and trust in the study. This is key. By addressing the potential participants' frustrations, they're more likely to participate. It's pretty straightforward. So don't hold back on saying thank you. Think of yourself as a person with a tight schedule. You get a call and it might not be of interest. So saying thank you is a way to appreciate their time that they're sparing for you. So be nice. It pays off. That's really the message that I'm trying to get across here. Now, this one here is pretty straightforward. Define the next steps that they're going to take or that you're going to take with them. It represents professionalism, and it can result in earning more trust, which can result in a randomized patient not skipping their appointment, right? So let's move on here to the next slide. And now to qualify, So that is pretty much it, folks. Thank you very much. We do have a special offer on video production and editing or website development if you are interested. And so if, you know, those videos that I mentioned that you can create, because we want everybody to do something like that, or as many people, as many sites as possible, we do have a special here. Just mention this webinar, and we can edit a 2-minute video for you for just $50. So we don't make any money on that, but we just want to really test that hypothesis, as we think it would help and be effective for a lot of research sites out there. And if your website can use some work, then we're in the business also of building websites for sponsors and studies. So if you are interested in revamping or creating a new website for your site, then normally we do that for $3,000. But if you mention this webinar, we can slash that down to just $1,500. All right. Thank you very much for your time, everyone. I hope you found some value in this. I hope you're able to implement at least one of the tips or suggestions that we mentioned, and we really are of the belief that that will go a long way. All right. Thank you for watching.